The fire in the Granite Shadow. Early spring in the eastern Sierra Nevadas always carried a deceptive kind of promise. Snow still clung to the highest peaks like bleached bone, but the lower canyons, those deep granite cracks ribboned with creek water, were waking up. Melt hummed under boulders, willows tasted sunlight again, and for Marin Carter, it felt like the perfect place to celebrate. She'd just received the phone call that she'd been chosen for her dream conservation fellowship. After years of dead-end jobs and seasonal fieldwork, something had finally broken her way. She wanted to start her new chapter alone, quietly, in the mountains she loved most. A 3-day backpacking loop near Bishop, something challenging, but well within her experience, felt like the right tribute. She never imagined how quickly celebration could turn into survival. Day 1. Into the Granite Maze. Marin parked her dusty Subaru at the trailhead off Highway 395, the morning sun turning the snowfields pale gold. The air smelled sharp, like cold quartz. She strapped on her pack, double-checked her map, and set off toward a trail she'd hiked pieces of before, never the full loop, but familiar enough. The forest greeted her with its usual welcome, lodgepole pines whispering overhead, spring creeks running high from meltwater, distant cliffs glowing warm and pink. She hiked several miles without issue, set up camp near a small alpine pond, and watched the moon rise behind a ridge as she sipped tea. Nothing felt wrong yet, nothing hinted at the nightmare coming. But later that night, as the wind picked up, she heard something. Just once, a crack deep in the trees, sharp enough to sit her upright. Probably ice breaking, she told herself. Happens every spring. Still, she slept poorly. Day 2. The wrong turn. By late morning, clouds gathered over the White Mountains in the east, shadows crawling fast. Marin continued upward through a narrow granite chute. The trail disappeared under patches of stubborn snow, but she expected that. She had GPS, compass, map. She'd done this before, but sometime around midday, following what she thought was a side spur of the trail, Marin realized the markers were gone. Every direction looked the same: white patches, black rock, the skeletal branches of windblown pines. She wasn't panicked yet, just annoyed. She tried her GPS. It flashed an error, then died, the cold draining the battery quickly. She pulled out her map but couldn't make sense of the ridgelines from her unfamiliar angle. That crack she heard last night echoed in her memory now, as if warning her. By late afternoon she admitted it, she was off trail. And worse, snow began to fall in thin, needling flakes. She camped early, telling herself tomorrow she'd correct everything. Day 3. Hunger, cold, and the sound in the trees. The next morning the world looked different. Not blanketed in snow, but powdered unevenly, like someone had shaken chalk dust across the mountains. The sky was a pale, pitiless gray. Marin tried retracing her steps downhill, but the terrain shifted strangely. Canyons cut where she didn't remember. Granite domes rose in places she swore were flat the day before. Every time she thought she recognized a formation, it turned out to be something else. Panic simmered quietly. She rationed her food, just 2 more days' worth of calories. Around dusk she heard it again. That crack, like a heavy branch splitting, but closer this time. She froze. Maybe it was just the snow thawing and refreezing. Maybe, but in those empty woods, every sound felt meaningful. She whispered to herself, "You're not dying out here. Not like this." Day 4. The fire. Marin woke shivering violently. She'd slept through her last chemical hand warmers. Her lips felt numb, her fingers stiff. She couldn't stop coughing, and she realized she hadn't peed in almost 18 hours. Her body was conserving every drop. She was slipping into hypothermia. She needed rescue. She needed warmth. She needed to be seen. So she did the only thing she could think of. She gathered whatever dead branches she could find, carved curls of bark, built a small fire in a protected spot between rocks. The flame started small, trembling like a dying star, then grew. She fed it carefully, relieved to feel even the slightest thaw in her fingers. Then a gust of wind roared down the canyon, hot and sudden. It snapped the fire upright like a living thing. Sparks erupted, tiny, glowing seeds that leapt into the brush. "No, no, no," she screamed, scrambling to stamp them out. But the wind had its own agenda. The ground was drier than she'd realized. The little flame she'd fed for life became something monstrous in seconds. A line of fire raced into the forest like someone had dragged a torch through gasoline. Within minutes, smoke towered above the trees. She backed away, heat blistering her skin, coughing until her chest rattled. And somewhere inside the roaring inferno, She swore she heard another crack, but this time it wasn't ice or wood. It was something collapsing, something big, rescue and devastation. Hours later, Marin couldn't say how many, she heard helicopter blades thundering above the smoke. Voices shouted, shapes moved through the haze, firefighters appearing like ghosts. She tried to run to them but stumbled, her legs shaking, her vision blotched. A firefighter grabbed her under the arms, yelling, "We've got one alive. Move, move, move." They carried her out, practically throwing her onto a stretcher as the fire advanced behind them. One ember landed on her pant leg and burned a hole straight to her skin. She screamed until her voice broke. Later, in the sterile coldness of a Bishop hospital room, she woke bandaged from hip to ankle, lungs scraped raw from smoke. She learned she'd been minutes from organ failure. She learned 2 firefighters had died in a sudden wind shift trying to contain the blaze. And she learned the fire, the one she started, had burned 15,432 acres. Her celebration had turned into a catastrophe. The legal battle of the century. When Marin was finally stable enough to sit upright, 2 officers arrived. Their faces were stone. "Marin Carter," one said, "you're being charged with involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and negligent ignition of a wildfire." She stared at them. I was trying to survive. "No one is saying you meant for this to happen," the officer replied quietly. "But people are dead, and the state is treating this as a criminal act." Her hands shook. A fire she started to save her own life had taken others. News outlets descended like vultures. Lost hiker sparks massive Eastern Sierra fire. WHO should pay for negligence? Fire kills too. Is the survivor responsible? Some commenters called her a murderer. Others said she was a scapegoat. Protesters gathered on both sides. Her trial became national news. The prosecution argued she was reckless. She went off trail, didn't carry enough emergency supplies, didn't prepare for early spring storms. The defense argued she was dying, hypothermic, starving, desperate, and her fire was the reasonable last act of a human trying to stay alive. But the courtroom grew tense when the families of the 2 fallen firefighters took the stand. Their grief radiated in every word. Marin couldn't bring herself to look at them. The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 18 hours. Marin sat in the cold courtroom, palms sweating through her bandages. The jurors filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreman cleared her throat. For the charge of involuntary manslaughter. Marin's breath stopped. "We find the defendant." Time froze. The mountains, the fire, the screaming wind, the crack in the trees, all of it crashed back into her mind at once. But the verdict would forever change her life. And whether she walked free, or spent the rest of her life behind bars, one truth would never leave her. She survived a place that almost killed her, but she would never stop paying for it.